So they fixed it, and because nobody on our side said anything or did anything except for, Molly Hemingway tweeted it out, and that was helpful, and people at Whatfinger posted it, and that was great, but there was a whole army of conservative media that I shared it with that if they would have said something, then all their readers and everybody would have gone and tried it for themselves, clicked this microphone button and tried it for themselves, and seen it happen with their own eyes, and then Google would have had to answer for that. And as I've written, we think Google is robbing banks, just to use an analogy. We think that they're robbing banks. And they say, no, we're not, no, we're not, no, we're not. We have no evidence to the contrary. We can't prove that they're doing it. But I was able to prove that they were shoplifting gum. And I put conservative media and everybody in a position to let the rest of the world catch them red-handed. Because if you would have gone and clicked this a week ago, you would have seen Google, quote-unquote, shoplifting gum. Contrary to their denials, they say, no, we never steal anything. Well, we had evidence that they do. But because conservative media didn't do anything, then now they fixed Google got to go and quietly fix it, and they don't have to answer for anything because now people just say, it's kind of spilled milk a little bit, and it's not as compelling evidence. So I would still love, there's something forensic that would still show in the code that their programmers purposefully kept the P in President Trump lowercase, i.e. shoplifted gum, inserted their political bias. I'm sure that forensic evidence somehow exists, in the digital space. I don't have any idea how to get it. Heck, I couldn't even get somebody to read my piece other than Molly. But here, so they fixed it, though. President Obama or President Reagan or President Clinton or President Carter or President Bush or President Trump. Completely fixed. All capitals. Right down to President Trump. In the example I did before, I'm just going to do the same thing, so I changed the order up. President Obama or President Clinton or President Trump or President Bush or President Reagan or blah, blah, blah. So they fixed it. And, you'd think, okay, that's good. They fixed it. That's a good thing. And it is, because my other lament was that they are doing the people who programmed it to not capitalize the P in President Trump did so on a feature that blind people use and rely on. And blind people are the only ones who didn't know that they were being unwitting vessels of Google's disrespect for President Trump, because that's what it looked like a week ago when I did all this. So that was sort of another issue. It kind of showed not only do they insert their bias, but they're willing to do so, at the expense of disabled people, the visually impaired, who are, become unwitting vessels of their disrespect for President Trump. So I'm glad they fixed it for that reason, but they needed to answer for it, and because it spoke to the bigger issue about them robbing banks, i.e. corrupting their algorithm so that the search results come back with their political bias inserted. That's the big question. Does the political bias of virtually everybody that's employed by Google make its way into their product? Google said it didn't. I proved that it did. And conservative media completely ignored it because they're a bunch of useless grifters who came to do good, but they stayed to do well, and in the end, all they do is help themselves and each other. They're not really interested in winning. President Trump came along and kicked their butts and showed them how it's done. They'd been telling us for decades that we're not allowed to uphold our immigration laws. We're not allowed to complain about media bias. That's what conservative media brought to the table. Trump either fired or demoted every single one of them, and frankly, at a time like this, I couldn't be happier about it because they yet again dropped the ball, because they're just too wrapped up in their own little high school cafeteria popularity contests and cliques. And if you're from the outside and you offer any criticism toward them at all, they simply won't listen, even when it was something really big like this. We could have had Google on the ropes and forced them to explain the glaring evidence that I provided that showed their bias does make its way into the code. We had them on the ropes. They were in a position where they would have had to answer for it. But because the conservative media are a bunch of useless, lazy grifters who don't actually care about doing anything, especially if it means having somebody like me who's outside of their clique get a little bit of credit for something, they're just going to sit on it. They're not going to do anything. And instead, Google gets to fix it quietly and get off the hook. Pretty painful to watch.